Released May 25th, 2023 for the Quest 2 by developer and publisher Carbon Studio, Crimen Mercenary Tales is an easygoing, for most part, arcade-styled hack-and-slash set in a beautiful, cel-shaded, swashbuckling world, where you step foot in the shoes of various characters, more than willing to share their unbelievable tales of adventure with you.
Fine.
Thanks to the publisher for the review key.
You vagabond!
Crimen Mercenary Tales, by all indications, is a game the devs do not expect or want you to take too seriously. This is evident in all factors of this game, but shines particularly bright where the story is concerned. The story of Crimen is broken up into 8 parts, between 8 characters, and these stories do not intersect. They have no relation to each other. Again, this is a highly satirical approach to the pirate era. Expect nothing serious as you'd find in games such as Assassin's Creed or the like. There is a new VR game coming out, executive produced by Lucy Liu, called The Pirate Queen, so if you're looking for something a tad more on the serious side, in VR, you may want to focus your attention there. But for what this is, Crimen delivers this PG-styled adventure quite well. Once you take heed to my disclaimer, not to take this seriously, you may have a good time with this.
Your hero is here!
Oh, Carol, what are you doing here?
There are these 8 characters in a tavern whose stories you play out as each of them. These stories range from saving a gold-digging damsel in distress, to fighting skeletons on a wrecked ship, to fighting your house after a mishap in the kitchen. Yeah, you heard me right.
I have to admit, it's so much fun. But I think it's time to stop, you know?
Over in sound, Carbon Studio did well here. The music is quite fitting, the sound effects are in place, and the voice acting, though not great, as I get this feeling that if I spoke the languages that these accents represent, I'd feel the same way here as I felt when I watched Taye Diggs and how Stella got her groove back. Yeah, for those of you who may not know this, Jamaicans do not sound like that. A cringe-inducing, humiliating representation at best, Mr. Diggs. Anyway, my point is, I suspect these accents were not voiced by authentic persons. I may very well be wrong, but something seemed forced and overdone in the dialogue. Still, I deduct no points. Good job on the B-movie voice acting, Carbon Studio.
You stay there. I'll be with you in a jiffy.
Do hurry up. I don't have all day.
The only issue I have with the audio were these glitches, where I'd hear, for example, the sound of a boomerang flying, when there was none, and a couple other audio oddities. The visuals here are real nice. When I see devs make the best use of the Quest's limited power, I always applaud and commend. Carbon Studio went with a cel-shaded cartoon aesthetic, and not just a cel-shaded art style, as this isn't always done well. The characters are incredibly detailed in this art style, both in art design and animations. The environments also look really good in most places. At times I noticed some bland textures, but for most part, absolutely beautiful visuals.
Here, you thieving bastard. I'll give you a good hiding.
Over in gameplay, this is where Crimen begins a game of hit and miss. I was really looking forward to this game before release. It just looked great. Usually, when I become interested in a game purely based on aesthetics, I keep fingers crossed that the gameplay matches up. Carbon Studio, however, are responsible for Warhammer Age of Sigmar Tempestfall, and while I had a few issues with that release, some of which seems to be a bit of a signature for Carbon Studio at this point, as a couple of them rear their ugly heads here as well, Tempestfall is the game that got me into Warhammer, and is a game I hold in high regard to this day, so I wasn't worried entering the world of Crimen.
Let's go!
On startup, we have a decent amount of options, the usual suspects really, general, movement, audio, and credits. Enough to get you on your way, selecting between click or smooth turning, locomotion style, sound preferences, etc. You've got the usual on-the-job style tutorial, where you whistle while you work, learn as you go along. The first story you embark on serves as the official tutorial, but the tutorial basically continues throughout the game as you come upon different scenarios on your adventures that may or may not require explanations.
Walking skeletons! You said nothing about fighting the undead.
Right, because you'll be doing the fighting.
This being a beat-em-up, a hack-and-slash, combat is the most important element at play. This, however, is where my issues with Crimen begin. This got infuriating at certain points. Crimen is primarily a melee combat-focused game, where as you go along, you may collect these temporary power-up items that break after just a few hits. You can grab muskets, bows, hand cannons, some interesting looking made-up guns, bombs, and even pots and pans in the environment. You can throw items at your enemy, but once again, throwing is a pain here. I'm not certain what it is about throwing in VR that's so hard to get right, but other than a few games, Battle Sister comes to mind. Throwing is the bane of my VR gaming existence.
We continued our journey.
You're also able to use other items in the environment, like this here, poop on a stick, which distracts, for lack of a better word, your foes. These items are quite entertaining and adds to Crimen's comical cartoon-like nature. My only wish is, there should be some kind of sound effect maybe, each time a special item appears and it disappears. I found this to be an issue, as sometimes things would get real heated, and I either would not know when a much needed item like a musket was available, or when one expired. So I'd either be swinging an empty hand because the club I got expired, or getting my butt handed to me when there was a cannon floating about that could have helped me out a great deal, but was too busy to notice. The thing is, combat got some major issues. Issues I trust Carbon will be able to iron out with a few more patches. The main problem here is collision detection. This is pretty bad. Combat in Crimen, after the first few encounters, will seem like nothing more than try your luck flailing. Combat is supposed to be like this. The enemy telegraphs all their strikes. At first, it's real easy to read them and to tell where they're coming from, but later, although this game remains relatively easy throughout its entire duration, the enemy will start to come at you in greater numbers and with a bit more attack variety. But still, the mechanics remain the same. Watch for their telegraphed motion. Block or dodge accordingly.
Yeah!
There are also some heavies. You have to do some QTE combat here to physically dodge, then enter into another QTE style section, where you strike their shield in the right direction to topple their guard. These QTEs come up frequently, especially in the boss fights. I was never bothered by QTEs, so I had no issue here. I found them quite entertaining actually, and a decent fit to what this game actually is. But back to the collision detection. I'd be swinging at enemies. I'm not missing, they're not blocking, but nothing is happening. I hear that swishing sound, and nothing. This is bad, real bad. This is a hack and slash game. Most fights, I felt like I was hacking and slashing at mid-air, and this feel was present in Tempest Fall. But it's not that striking at ear feel, that weightless combat feeling I'm talking about here. It's striking at the enemy and absolutely nothing happens. They just keep coming. When you find yourself outmanned, outnumbered, overwhelmed by a group of attackers, and you're swinging for dear life, but hardly any of your strikes are registering, then you see the insulting, cynical game over screen pop up. It may have you rage quitting.
Come on! That didn't happen!
Then, there is the mobility issue. Your character is not nimble at all. There were many times I'd love to have been able to use some kind of dodge or dash mechanic, but there was none. There is teleportation, but this never seemed to work well as a dash substitute. I was never able to get enough room between myself and the enemy at any time. I can't sprint, dash, nothing, and there were many times I really needed to.
More of that swine's mid. How can I focus on robbing this place when everyone wants to fight me?
Sometimes the enemy would get real close to you in numbers, and you really need some room to maneuver, but your maneuvering skills are pretty much non-existent. Then, there were these times when you got crowded, and the screen would go black. Infuriating. The screen going black thing also happened outside of that. There was one time where I was supposed to be climbing, and the screen kept flickering.
Very well, let's continue.
It's funny. The more you don't want to fight someone, the more...
The combat has its up moments, but many times I saw an up, it found a way to trip over itself. Like this cool mechanic where you can deflect arrows back at the enemy. 1. Sometimes the arrow would get stuck in midair. Then 2. Once these arrows are fired at you, it's like they're heat-seeking arrows. If you don't do the whole hit them with your weapon thing, they seem to follow you until they make contact.
Losing is not something I do, you know?
There's a lot of climbing in Crimen as well, but this was also hit or miss. Sometimes I'd be climbing and I couldn't grab the ledge I was supposed to grab. This goes back to collision detection. Crimen feels a bit undercooked, guys, like it needed a few more months of development. I see where Carbon got a lot right, but I also see where several elements seem half-baked. And I know Carbon Studio is better than this.
No! My immortality!
I do like the way the boss fights were handled though, this coming from someone who abhors boss fights. But like the rest of Crimen, which feels much like it could be finished in a day, the boss fights were easy, and not every stage has a boss at the end. The boss fights keep you stuck for one reason or the other in one place, and consists of real-time strikes dealt by quick-time events, which include directional strikes. The bosses had this 3 strikes and you're out style similar to Mario games, and none were a problem to beat.
You're nothing but a filthy thief!
Helena, it's over. You can come down.
Based on the overall arcade casual style of Crimen, I can tell the devs wanted this to be a stress-free experience. As like I said, this is a relatively easy and short game. The only stress came from the collision detection issues and your character's lack of mobility during fights. It's a linear experience, with only one real puzzle that I can recall, which I solved by trial and error. Other moments will pop up, which may seem lightly puzzling, but don't let the look of the stages fool you. This is no Tomb Raider. The puzzles were barely that, barely puzzling.
If I'm not wrong, I should hit those skulls to finish the ritual.
So at the end of it all, after playing through Crimen Mercenary Tales to the end credits, I'm going to have to say it's an okay game. But its potential outweighs what it currently delivers. Good news is, this ain't back in the 80s and 90s, where you buy a shitty or mediocre game and you're stuck with whatever you got. I'm certain, if Carbon Studio agrees with me on the flaws I found, they could iron them all out with an update or two. There's nothing game-breaking or irreparable here.
I'm not done yet!
Thank you for watching. If you like my content, feel free to like, share, comment, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Check out my live streams here on YouTube and my Trovo Live channel. Also, if you're in the Caribbean, watch full episodes of the Lab Video Game TV only on Flow One in 25 countries across the Caribbean. For exclusive content and giveaways that aren't available here, download the official Flow Sports app to watch the Lab Video Game TV on the go. Check out the website at thelabvideogametv.com or make contact at thelabvideogametv.com. If I somehow, on the other hand, found a way to piss you off with this one though, then hey, dislike, unsub, leave a feisty comment, whatever it takes to make you sleep better, partner. Either way, I won't hold it against you. Our game is never over.
Enjoyed that, eh? Excelente. And I enjoyed telling you my story.